I am going to be giving some information about the Florida Biscayne National Park and the challenges to the national park, which is the severe hurricane damage they have experienced with their most recent damaging hurricane, which was Irma, and how the damage has affected the park. And I will also be going over the geology of the park and a lot of the different features that makes the park how it is. The intended audience for this is the general public that is looking for a little bit more information about Biscayne National Park and all of the hurricane damage that the park went through, and my peers that are going to be watching this in my National Geology of the Parks class. This is the map of the Biscayne National Park in Florida, and it shows a lot of good detail with a lot of all the other surrounding keys and the oceans, and the key on the map does a great job explaining what everything else on the map means. It shows the different depths of water, how deep stuff can go, there's ranger stations, the different things that are included at the national park, like picnics, trails, boat launches, marinas, ranger stations, basically a lot of the important things that are expected at a national park. So it's a lot easier when people decide to go visit the national park that they know what they can do and where to go, so they hopefully don't get lost. There are a lot of challenges that come with a national park, but the main challenge to Biscayne National Park is the hurricanes and the damage that comes with the hurricanes. There's actually been a lot of hurricanes that have affected the Biscayne National Park, but a lot of them don't have severe damage like Irma did. The Irma was the most recent one that caused a lot of damage and caused the park to actually close down for a long period of time. Hurricane Irma was a catastrophic hurricane that occurred from August 31st, 2017 to September 11th, 2017, and it was actually one of the biggest hurricanes the Atlantic had ever seen. The winds were as strong as 185 miles per hour. Hurricane didn't just devastate the Biscayne National Park, it devastated a lot of the lower part of Florida and a lot of the Caribbean islands, and it also kind of towards the end moved towards Georgia and those surrounding areas and states. So here is a couple pictures of the aftermath of Biscayne National Park after Irma had hit. On the left picture is actually from the U.S. Virgin Islands National Park, and I just thought that it showed a good amount of damage. You can see the boats and the trees that have fallen down, and you can just tell it's completely damaged. And then on the right picture is at the Biscayne National Park, and I thought this was an interesting picture because you could literally see the whole tree and the stump that and the root that came out just from this hurricane, and it just shows how powerful hurricanes actually are. You wouldn't really think that it could cause that much damage, but it does. Here are the pros and cons of the challenge to the national park, which is hurricanes. There aren't really any pros to hurricanes, but I guess a pro, looking at it from an extremely optimistic sense, is that it showed people how powerful nature can actually be, and to probably not take your time for granted because you never know what could actually happen. And obviously there are a lot of negative aspects of Irma. One of them included the damage it brought, and this wasn't just to the Biscayne National Park, it was to all the affected areas from Irma, and that was about 150 to 200 billion dollars. There were some deaths, and that was about 134 people, and it just how catastrophic the actual storm was. You can see in this picture the formation of Irma and how huge it is on the ocean, and you just see it coming our way. Here is the start of my part 2, which is the geology of Biscayne National Park. There are 4 main keys to Biscayne National Park for the geological features. The first one is the mangrove forest along the mainland shore, which you can see in this picture. All of the greenery is the forest. The southern expanse of Biscayne Bay, which is in the southern lower part of this picture, that vast ocean and water. The northernmost Florida Keys, which you can kind of see, but not very well in this picture, kind of up in the front. And then a large chunk of the 3rd largest coral reef in the world, which is not pictured in this, but yes. There's a lot of geological influences that make Biscayne National Park how it is today. The first one is the changing sea levels, which can be caused by how the ocean is moving that day and how it's kind of getting into the national park. The currents, for how hard the current is, or if it's not very fast, it just kind of depends on the day, the weather. Hurricanes are obviously a huge geological influence that make the park how it is, because a hurricane obviously sweeps through like Irma did. It's going to cause a lot of damage to the park. The park is going to have to shut down. It's going to not bring as many tourists. It just kind of depends on that. The reef building organisms like corals, because this is the 3rd largest coral reef in the world now, and we know that the coral reefs are kind of going extinct and they're not as healthy as they used to be. So it's very important for this park that they keep that going and make sure that it's not affected. The subtropical climate of South Florida has forests that are like the Caribbean. It's very different from a lot of the other forests or parks that are in America, more so like the Northern America. And one of my favorites is actually the sea turtles, because sea turtles are endangered and a lot of people don't think about them as much as they should. There's actually a nesting area in the park for the sea turtles, so we make sure that they're protected there. You can see in the lower right-hand corner this sea turtle at the park. You can actually go, if you're lucky, you can see them at the park floating around the coral reefs or in the bay. So like I said before, the coral reefs in Biscayne National Park is a huge geological feature for the park. The coral reefs in Biscayne National Park make up a huge amount for the geological features and includes the 3rd largest coral reef in the world. The reef is active day and night, and there are lots of animals that feed on the reef. The reef goes through a shift change, which basically means that the softer corals go to sleep at night, and then when those corals go to sleep, the harder corals emerge for feeding for the other animals. So they kind of work as a team to make sure that everything is fed, basically. In this picture, you can see a nursing shark just strolling through the coral reef. So when you're scuba diving or snorkeling, sometimes you can see animals like that are going through the coral reef. So the water quality at Biscayne National Park is extremely important for the geological features at the park. Since 1990, the National Park Service has gathered water quality data with remote sensing systems. There are 6 locations to measure specifics that include dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, turbidity, and tide height. which can show a lot. Like if the tides are really high, they can measure that and see what they can do about that. The water sampling helps increase their understanding of the Biscayne Bay hydrological system and provides reliable data for the park managers to use, and it helps with weather patterns. So if they're doing this testing, this water sampling, if they notice something that could be the start of like a tropical storm or a hurricane, they can, start preparing for that a little bit more. And it also gives an insight of how the park has changed over the years and see if there's pollution that has helped with that change or other factors. And an interesting fact is the national park is actually 95% water, which I thought was very interesting because even though it is on the water, you would think that maybe a little bit more of that percentage would be land and other things to do, but I think it's very cool that it is 95% water. The references for the slideshow is the National Park Biscayne information, the NPS National Park closing, information about Hurricane Irma on CNN, New York Times, the aftermath of Irma, global warming policy forum, CNN again. I talked with my mother about Irma, and I had some conversations with my peers about Irma and the damages that it included.